Dear friends, it's always a joy to talk about the 9-year plan. The plan represents the marching orders for all of us over the 8 remaining years in its unfoldment. It will serve as the basis of the subsequent plans until the year 2046, and it's a guide that should shape the life of every follower of Baha'u'llah. Different aspects of the plan can be discussed, and today I like to share a few thoughts with you about a question each of us may have, namely, what is my role in the 9-year plan in my own cluster? The 9-year plan was given to us by the Universal House of Justice in its letter of 30th of December 2021 addressed to the councillors. The 2022 Rizwan message also provides supplementary information about it. The plan has one single aim: the release of the society building power of the faith in ever greater measures. How befitting then that such a major undertaking focused on the release of the society building power of the faith began after a year of preparation, reflection, and great exertion of the friends worldwide to mark the centenary of the ascension of Abdul Baha and paying tribute to the life of the perfect exemplar of Baha'u'llah's teachings. Given that Abdul Baha, in the words of the House of Justice, was a pure channel through which the forces released by the revelation of Baha'u'llah could act upon the world. It's a plan of 9 years duration, which we can and should, as advised by the House of Justice, view it as unfolding in 2 phases of 4 and 5 years duration, planning for advances by Rizwan 2026 and then by Rizwan 2031. The 9-year plan has 2 numerical goals as far as I understand it. One, having a program of growth at some level of development in around 14,000 clusters in the world, 11,000 of which could be considered intensive programs of growth. And 2, a total of 5,000 of these 11,000 to have passed milestone 3, with at least one such cluster in every country and every region. It also has a number of long-term qualitative goals. Some of them are: 1, a further rise in the capacity of the individual believer, the local community, and the institutions of the faith, for each to play its part, develop its capacities and qualities, knowing that each is incapable of manifesting its full potential on its own. Second, taking on a more expansive view on the concept of the training institute, acquiring a deeper appreciation for the centrality of education to a community founded on Baha'i principles, and making a cherished commitment to lending support and service for further development of an educational system in a state of constant refinements. Third, raising capacity for administration at all levels, preparing for effective participation in the discourses of society and for the emergence of social action initiatives. And fourth, expanding our sense of focus to accommodate many lines of action, all of which must advance without being in competition. The pursuit of these goals should assist us to have a befitting answer for the peoples of the world when they ask us, what do the Baha'is do to serve humanity? Paragraph 4 of the letter of the 30th of December offers an answer to this question. These days, when talking about service, particularly by religious communities, activities such as food drives, distributing clothes, cleaning of parks and rivers come to mind. Such services are valuable and praiseworthy for anyone who can render them. However, they are comparable to donating a fish to a hungry man. A more impactful service to that man, we know, would be to teach him how to fish. And yet, the more fundamental and profound service to him would be to quicken his heart and soul and empower him to use the God-given talents not only to meet his own needs, but also to contribute to the well-being of his fellow human beings. By doing so, not only are his material needs met, but also his spiritual needs are restored. Needs such as his dignity, his nobility, and his sense of belonging to the community of human race, becoming a quickened citizen of the world and a protagonist of its betterment. Empowering people as a service to humanity. This empowerment, in the words of Shoghi Effendi, is to bring the light of divine guidance and the quickening power of the Spirit to an entirely new area. By quickening hearts, by empowering people to make use of the spiritual energies released as a result of the dawning of the day of oneness, the God-given capacities of endless individuals and groups are set loose for use within a framework that addresses their spiritual and material needs and enables them to take charge of their own progress. This is a service that can only be rendered to humanity by those attracted to the vision of Baha'u'llah. A Baha'i valuing all types of service rendered with purity of heart, yet distinguishing between services that any good-hearted person can render and those that can only be rendered by those whose hearts are illumined by the light of the revelation of Baha'u'llah, will do well to prioritize time and energy for the services he or she wishes to render. The 9-year plan, in addition to setting goals as what the community of the greatest name must aspire to fulfill, offers various paths to achieve each goal. The Rizwan 2023 message of the Universal House of Justice reviews the progress made during the first year of the plan, describing the Baha'i community as a community whose high-mindedness and high resolve are befitting of its high calling. In the same message, the House of Justice expresses its profound joy that the Friends enter the second year of the plan with a fresh perspective and a profound insight into the significance of what they seek to achieve. Here in Canada too, we have had the joyful response of the Friends to a dynamic start of the plan, including impressive progress towards preparation for the construction of the National House of Worship in this blessed land, and so many gatherings of the Friends in Canada in order to acquire fresh perspective of what should be achieved during the second year of the plan, and to strengthen our resolve to arise sacrificially to do so, is also praiseworthy. This fascinating global perspective of progress, friends, in which Baha'is, together with their like-minded friends in more than 6,000 clusters around the world, are striving to learn how to apply Baha'u'llah's remedy to the ills of the society around them, thereby laying the foundation of communities that will empower people to work together collaboratively to address their material and spiritual needs, and to contribute to the building of a better world based on the oneness of the human race, is a powerful means of motivation for us all to think globally and act locally, and to redouble our sacrificial efforts in our own clusters. Mention of the sacrificial efforts needed to fulfill the plan's objective reminds us all of the House of Justice statement that the 9-year plan will make demands of the individual believer, the community, and the institutions reminiscent of the demands that the Guardian made of the Baha'i world at the outset of the 10-year crusade. It may be helpful to say a few words about the 10-year crusade. The aim of the 10-year crusade, friends, was the spiritual conquest of the planet. The believers were not willing to let worldly affairs deprive them of the services the beloved Guardian had asked that generation of Baha'is to render. This did not mean that anyone had to neglect his or her worldly life. Far from it. It meant that they decided to rearrange their lives around service to the needs of the 10-year crusade, and in this new life they attended to both their material and spiritual needs. They set the priority of their lives, moved on, and often prospered even materially. Every individual and every family participated in the 10-year crusade. Those who could go pioneering internationally did so with all material uncertainties this entailed. Many of those who could not do so pioneered in their home fronts and achieved great results in the field of teaching. Families that could not go pioneering did the best to support their children, relatives, and other friends who could respond to the calls issued in the plan. Those who had to stay at home but moved by a deep desire to participate in the global crusade examined their daily and weekly lives and made changes in their working patterns when and if necessary, so as to ensure they would have adequate time for service to the faith, whether in the field of teaching or administration. Everyone, young and old, rich and poor, contributed to the funds, thereby supporting the formation of new Baha'i institutions in many lands. In their prayers, they beseech Baha'u'llah to guide and protect his servants in the fields of service everywhere. The spiritual conquering of the planet was thus achieved, and at the end of the plan, the Universal House of Justice was established. At the start of the 10-year crusade, the significance of all its goals was not fully clear for all the friends. The individual workers in the field of service were not necessarily aware of the urgency of their services in relation to the very vital law of Baha'u'llah, the formation of the Universal House of Justice. What made this mighty undertaking a success was the friends' loyalty and love for the Guardian. This prompted them to arise and to do what each could do in response to the call of their beloved Guardian. These sacrificial efforts released a multitude of spiritual forces that were instrumental in transforming hearts, raising up Baha'i communities, greatly expanded the number of Baha'i institutions throughout the world, and ultimately establishing the Universal House of Justice. The cause of God entered a new critical stage in its progress and in its ability to serve humankind. This generation of Baha'is who responded, whether as individuals or in concert with others, to the goals set by the Guardian for the 10-year crusade will always be lauded with a special measure of love and appreciation in the annals of our faith. Had the friends not arisen, the progress of the divine plan would have been delayed. It is simply impossible to imagine that they would not have responded, and even more difficult to imagine the consequences of such inaction. There are still many among us who served during the 10-year crusade or who remember the stories of sacrificial services of many friends from the East and the West. are taking the time to recall these stories during these present days will most assuredly be inspirational. In terms of the sacrificial efforts needed to fulfill the 9-year plan's objectives in our clusters, there is also a simple mathematical calculations that we should consider. The more human resources available in a cluster, the easier for everyone to advance the process of community building. But to get to the stage where human resources are in abundance in a cluster, sacrificial efforts are required by the smaller number of the existing dedicated people. Naturally, different individuals will be able to do this to varying degrees. But anyone who makes such efforts to the best of his or her ability is the recipient of this honor that the House of Justice voiced in its message of 30th of December 2021, saying how immensely blessed are those souls who, alive to the greatness of this day and the significance of their actions, strive for the emergence of a society shaped by the divine teachings. Before exploring individual responsibilities towards the requirements of the plan, I would like to briefly share a point about the importance of knowing the plan. Paragraph 4 begins by noting that the Baha'is are on the one hand seeking to gain an ever more profound understanding of Baha'u'llah's teaching, and on the other are learning to apply them to the needs of their society. It is true that knowing the plan at a deeper level will be a great assistance to us in applying its provisions to our clusters. But we also know that the more we apply these provisions, the deeper our understanding of the plan and of his revelation will become. Sometimes it can take decades before the full wisdom and the strategic importance of the emphasis that is given to a certain activity of a plan is understood by the body of the believers. Nevertheless, history has shown that a lack of full understanding has never been an obstacle for Baha'is to arise to implement the goals of any of the plans. The legacy of the community is that whatever the level of its understanding of the divine plan, generation after generation of Baha'is have arisen to contribute to its successful implementation. This is our legacy, the legacy which we, the current generation, I am confident, will strive for until the goals of the 9-year plan are successfully achieved in our own cluster, in Canada, and in all the clusters in the world. In March of this year, Vida and I were in Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, to attend the inauguration of the first national house of worship in the Baha'i world. The glory of the ceremony, with more than 2,000 people in attendance, including the high-ranking officials of the government and of the diplomatic corps in the country, I did not describe, as you must have read of it in the Baha'i news. How the beauty of the temple and the landscaping of the surroundings have joined hands to create an environment that creates spiritual upliftment is something that one can only fully appreciate by being there. The quality of the National Assembly's reporting to the gathering on the progress of the community building efforts in that country, with more than 700,000 souls involved in the core activities, was indeed praiseworthy, and an example of what the House of Justice articulated in its 2023 Ridwan message of a Baha'i community that sees kinship, not difference. I'd like to share with you a thought that occurred to me when I was sitting in that spiritually empowering atmosphere. Overwhelmed by the majesty of that ceremony, it occurred to me that the process of international pioneering to DRC must have begun with the call of the beloved guardian during the 10-year crusade, and then reiterated in subsequent plans by the Universal House of Justice. Canada can be proud of her contributions as it sent a number of international pioneers to that country. These pioneers, as we all know, voluntarily made significant changes to their lives in order to partake of the bounties of service to the cause of Baha'u'llah when they responded to the needs of the divine plan at that time. Having lived in the neighboring country Zambia for years, I can tell you that many of the international pioneers focused on the stage of the development of the national community of their pioneering post were not fully alert to the significance of their own services within the bigger picture of the unfoldment of Baha'u'llah's New World Order. It was not, for instance, unusual to hear questions as to why so much significance is given to the formation of a local spiritual assembly in a remote village where outwardly little would appear to change or occur as a result of the formation of that assembly. At times, some may even have wondered about the amount of attention paid to the statistics regarding the number of local assemblies in any given region. Yet here we were, 50 years later, able to see in a more tangible way the services that the Baha'i community of the Congo is rendering to that country and to humanity, and to observe how that National Assembly is now functioning as one of the strong pillars of the Universal House of Justice, along with the other 176 National Assemblies that elected the membership of the House of Justice this Rizwan. I connected this thought to the process of the current 9-year plan, in which the House of Justice calls on us to strive for the emergence of a society shaped by the divine teachings, by advancing the process of entry by troops, and by releasing in greater measure the society building power of the cause of Baha'u'llah. If there is any one of us today who may not fully grasp the centrality of the Training Institute as an instrument for what we want to achieve, or grasp the significance of one or more aspect of any of the core activities in relation to building a civilization envisaged by Baha'u'llah, if there are times that we may wonder at the necessity of setting numerical goals and the attention paid to statistics related to the development of our cluster, we can be sure that the wisdom and the significance of our current community building efforts and the essentiality of our present work will gradually become clearer. So we strive to achieve the goals of the plan while at the same time we try to understand it. This thought process echoed for me what the House of Justice wrote on 26 March 2016 to the Baha'is of the United States and Canada, addressing them as the chosen recipients of Abdul Baha's tablets of the Divine Plan, and informing them of the success of the Divine Plan all over the world, stating that your sister communities, so many of which you helped to establish, are now mature, and you stand with them ready to take on the sterner challenges that lie ahead. In that same letter, the House of Justice told the Baha'is in these two countries that the movement of our clusters to the furthest frontiers of learning will usher in the time when the communities we build will directly combat and eventually eradicate the forces of corruption, of moral laxity, and of ingrained prejudice eating away at the vitals of society. These promises, friends, will most definitely materialize here, as evidenced by the experience thus far in the Congo. Let's go back to the question of my role in the 9-year plan in my own cluster. Regarding the quality aspect of the plan, Questions such as the following can be of assistance in identifying one's personal responsibilities. 1. How can I contribute more extensively to creating a new set of relationships among the three protagonists of the plan? Relations that are characteristics of the society envisaged by Baha'u'llah. 2. How can I make a cherished commitment to lend greater support to the efforts undertaken in the cluster in the path of the further development of the institute process? 3. What can I do to support the raising of capacity for administration at all levels? We will not explore any of these questions in details today. Rather, I made mention of them, dear friends, to emphasize how the 9-year plan truly is a wonderful blueprint that serves to influence and shape our own lives. Thinking about individual responsibilities to serve the 9-year plan, one basic responsibility for individual is to consciously strive to identify and develop the necessary capacities he or she needs to attend to the needs of the community building process in his or her cluster. The responsibilities of the individual towards the movement of cluster where he or she lives may be of 3 categories of tasks. 1. Those which I should undertake as my individual initiatives. That is, without being asked, without being necessarily supported, and perhaps without even expecting to be encouraged. 2. Those that I should undertake in support of the collective endeavors of my community. And 3. Those that I should undertake in support of the plans of the institutions of the faith. As to the type of activities in our cluster, paragraph 5 of the message explains that a greater expression of the society building power of the faith requires first and foremost still further advances in the process of entry by troops in every part of the world. Paragraph 7 states that the movement of clusters along a continuum of development will remain the basic model for the expansion and consolidation of the community as described in the previous plans. Based on these statements, if you ask, does this mean that advancing the process of entry by troops, the community building process as called for in the previous 5-year plan, will be continuing? I say yes, but this time it will be pursued through the lens of learning how to release in ever greater measure the society building power of the faith, which implies for me a shift in the way we perceive and conduct our activities. One basic point in this shift, as I see it, is to perceive the work of the plan as advised by the House of Justice as 2 essentially spiritual undertakings of diffusing the light of Baha'u'llah's revelation ever more widely and extending the roots of his faith ever more deeply into the soil of society, each of which, in the words of the House of Justice, has measurable outcomes. Perceiving our activities in this way increases our awareness of the profound value and significance of even the smallest of the activities in which we are engaged. The concept of spiritual undertakings having measurable outcomes also obliges us to be more systematic in carrying them out and in measuring their progress. Reflecting regularly on both undertakings, setting measurable goals, whether quarterly or annually, with delineating a path towards achieving each goal and assessing the progress are among the various practical steps that this shift demands. This shift has implications both for the cluster agencies and for individuals and families. Consider, for instance, the nature of quarterly or annual plans for a cluster. It does not have to be complicated. A few realistic goals and the path towards achieving each can constitute a plan. The following 4 interrelated plans appear to me essential for many of our clusters today. 1. A plan to strengthen the training institute in the cluster. What are the next 2-3 points about the training institute in the cluster that can be strengthened in the next coming year? What are the steps to be taken on the path to doing this? Number 2, a plan to increase the efficacy of the cycles of growth. What are the 2 or 3 things to improve the way cycles of growth work? And what is the path to achieving this? 3, a plan to increase the effectiveness of home visits by viewing it as an effective path not only for tackling the question of the isolation of believers, but also for addressing various needs of the cluster, including the promotion of core activities. And 4, a plan to help the believers to fan within their hearts a passion for teaching and reflect periodically on effective ways of teaching the faith in their surroundings. Another point in this shift may be related to being generally more systematic. Implicit in building an ever-advancing nucleus of individuals, or in creating a growth program of increasing size and intensity, is indeed the need for the use of measurable outcomes. Otherwise, the ever-increasing nature of the nucleus or the increasing size and intensity of the growth program may not receive the necessary attention. In the Rizwan 2021 message, the Universal House of Justice refers to the capacity for preparing simple plans at the level of the cluster that began to be cultivated, and encourage this to be expanded. How do we expand this capacity? Setting goals with measurable outcomes and identifying a path towards achieving each goal is a timely expansion of this capacity, in my opinion. Having plans and goals for a cluster can be very helpful in other ways, as it would, for example, make it easier for the teaching teams and individuals to make their own plans and set their own goals. One other point in this shift called for by the 9-year plan is implied in this guidance of the Universal House of Justice. The mobilization of a sizable number of Baha'is who are creatively and intelligently applying the plan's framework for action to the reality of their circumstances wherever in the cluster they live. It entails families and individual believers working together and making a conscious decision to see themselves as belonging to an expanding nucleus. This is already happening in a number of clusters through the formation of nuclei of friends or teaching teams. Of course, teams would need to be assisted to learn how best to function in the light of this guidance. A few friends from 4 adjacent neighborhoods in a cluster in the south sub-region of Ontario started serving as a team in 2019. At the beginning, they had 1 weekly devotional gatherings and only Baha'is participated in it. Regular study of the guidance of the House of Justice has allowed them to remain clear that they are not a group of friends to consult and agree on how to collaborate with each other in severing the faith in the cluster. Rather, by forming a team, they have created a space where a few friends get together in an orderly, regular way, committed to learn how to creatively and intelligently apply the plan's framework for action to the reality of their own circumstances. This commitment has implications, one of which is to learn not to make decisions based on what one thinks is a better way of teaching, but rather on experience of what has worked. Soon this group of friends learned that when the formation of a team is based on love and fellowship among the members, the result is the multiplication of power and capacities. When the team benefits from regularity of meetings and activities, from increasing systematization, and from action and reflection, progress can be significant. One of the ways learning from others with similar circumstances is achieved by the study of the written reports provided by the auxiliary board members to such teams. The team has learned that there are many benefits from applying to itself much of the guidance given to a cluster. For instance, considering the population around them in light of their concentric circles, reviewing regularly how to accompany each person within their concentric circle, setting numerical goals, and identifying a path to achieve each goal. The dynamics created by increasing the activities based on numerical goals and defining a path to achieve each goal has been a constructive experience. The path to achieving the goals has been focused on assisting their contacts to arise to serve. Members pursue the implementation of the team's goals in their own neighborhoods. 4 years later, the team had moved from 1 to 7 core activities and 1 fireside, all held regularly, with as many as 30 people from the wider society in their concentric circles, 3 or 4 of which could be considered protagonists, and 5 or 6 declarations. Their goals for RESVAN 2024 is 60 in their concentric circles, 11 core activities, and an additional 4 declarations. The guidance works. With more capacity, more can be achieved. The key is to better internalize the profound implications of this revolutionary aspect of Baha'u'llah's revelation, that the individual has a key responsibility towards the fulfillment of the divine vision. To do so, we need to better understand who in Baha'u'llah's system faces the actual challenge of the fulfillment of the vision of Baha'u'llah. Shoghi Effendi clarifies this by telling us in stirring terms, this challenge, he says, so severe and insistent, and yet so glorious, faces no doubt primarily the individual believer on whom, in the last resort, depends the fate of the entire community. The House of Justice reiterates this by stating that the role of the individual is of unique importance in the work of the cause. It is the individual who manifests the vitality of faith upon which the success of the teaching work and the development of the community depend. All the efforts of the institutions and the community are indeed aimed at inspiring and enabling individuals to arise and serve. Shoghi Effendi underscored the absolute necessity of individual initiative and action. And nothing can replace the responsibility laid upon the individual to contribute to the progress of the divine plan. In other words, whatever the case, whether the cluster agencies announce a plan or not, and whether or not there is enough encouragement to individuals to arise, one thing is absolutely clear: it is the responsibility of the individual to arise and serve the divine plan. How does one respond to this responsibility? In this light, each one of us can ask questions of ourselves. One essential question to me is this: do I consider the progress of the 9-year plan in my cluster as the preoccupation of my life, or just a duty? When something is my duty, I put it in the list of my duties and do my best to attend to the list. But if something is the preoccupation of my life, I constantly think and plan for it. It is something around which I would organize my entire life. When my material business is not doing well, its improvement is the preoccupation of my life until it's better. When my child is sick, her or his health becomes the preoccupation of my life. All such tasks are, of course, part of what God wants me to do, but what about the direct needs of the faith? Don't they also need my focused attention? With this question in mind, does the individual need a plan for his or her more direct services to the cause? Well, God the Almighty has two plans and has sent two manifestations of God to implement them. The greater plan of God is directly moved and overseen by Baha'u'llah. He also inspires and guides the Universal House of Justice to oversee the minor plan of God, in which individuals have a key role to play. Based on what is received from the House of Justice, and in consultation with the councillors, every National Assembly and every regional council, including those of Canada and that of Ontario, maps out a plan for its country and province. Clusters are increasingly moving towards creating clear plans with paths for the achievement of each goal. It is fascinating how, through the system Baha'u'llah has established, his divine plan, the minor plan of God, reaches our doorstep and gives each and every one of us the bounty and the opportunity to decide how we can contribute to the fulfillment of the divine vision for humanity. The minor plan of God has evolved, and its current stage is the 9-year plan. As each of us seek to align our life with the will of God, so as to win the good pleasure of Baha'u'llah, so as to show a befitting response to our love for the Universal House of Justice, questions naturally arise, such as, what can I as an individual, or what can we as a couple or a family do for the progress of the plan in our cluster? Is it imperative that this individual or family make a plan for what and how they want to contribute to the progress of the divine plan in their cluster? If they don't have a plan, how would they know how much time and energy they need to achieve what they want to do for Baha'u'llah? The goals set in each of our individual plans will naturally vary depending on our understanding of the revelation, on our interest and circumstances, and on our response to the qualitative and quantitative goals of the plan and the needs of our cluster. Among the immediate needs of all the clusters of our region is the capacity to teach the faith effectively and to invite larger numbers of people from the wider society to the courses of the training institute. If this capacity appears complex, the path to building it piece by piece is clear, thanks to our global learning over the past 27 years. The art of fostering lasting friendship with our neighbors, the passion to teach the faith, to learn the most effective approach to teaching in one's own neighborhood, to acquire the skill to introduce the Institute materials to our neighbors, friends, and co-workers, and to refine the language used to explain what the Baha'is are engaged in. All these are among the skills and approaches that are needed to build the capacity of teaching and inviting people to the Institute courses. For these arts, skills, and approaches to be more effective in assisting us to become active protagonists of the divine plan, we need to augment them with a deeper understanding of why the message of Baha'u'llah is indeed the sovereign remedy for every disease humanity is facing, and strengthening them with the understanding that the larger the numbers from the wider society participating in the activities, the stronger the process of community building will be, and the more visible will be the signs of the release of the society building power of the faith. Another set of capacities we need to develop in this regard is related to the changes each one of us must make in our lives in order to have adequate time and energy for the work of the faith and to be able to be engaged in many lines of action, all of which must advance without being in competition. As Baha'is, there are many things we must do. Baha'u'llah has enjoined upon us to observe laws and ordinances, and we as individuals see it our duty to observe them. The laws of obligatory prayer, fasting, payment of huququllah, etc. are examples of this. The responsibility laid upon the individual to engage in teaching the cause of God, however, appears to require special attention. First, he says the pen of the Most High has decreed and imposed upon everyone the obligation to teach the cause. Why has God imposed on us the responsibility to teach His cause? Why do we impose certain actions on our children, like observing a specific time for them to go to bed? Is it not because we know that it is for their own good, even if they don't understand it? Can it be that teaching the cause is an essential element of our spiritual growth, even if we don't understand it? Secondly, isn't it interesting that teaching the cause is the only matter about which there is no acceptable excuse if the individual is unable to do so? He has given us an alternative, which is that if we cannot teach ourselves, we must take measures that will enable someone else to do so on our behalf. Teaching the cause is a responsibility imposed upon each of us. It goes far beyond just duty. Paragraph 9 and 10 of 30th of December letter explains how vital individual teaching is to the progress of community building. Teaching the faith, of course, covers a wide range of activities aimed at assisting individual souls to walk the path and eventually recognize the truth of the revelation of Baha'u'llah. We carry out this task knowing full well that recognition and belonging are spiritual acts that only the individual can prayerfully and freely decide upon. Holding a regular devotional meeting and inviting people from the wider society. Holding or supporting children classes and the activities of junior youth groups. Attending and or encouraging our contacts to attend study circles. Holding regular firesides. Having elevated conversations with individuals on spiritual matters, or bringing the message of Baha'u'llah to people's attention through any other method, whether alone or as part of teaching campaigns. All such actions are teaching. The individual can choose how to teach, but is not excused from teaching. We must teach. The Universal House of Justice talks about the imperative for every Baha'i to set for himself individual teaching goals. It draws attention to the admonition of Abdul Baha to lead at least one new soul to the faith each year as an example of an individual goal, adding that many have capacities to do even more. And if there is any doubt in the minds of any of us as to whether or not we can contribute to the process of community building as described in the 9-year plan, here is the guidance of the Universal House of Justice to an individual in a letter from 2019. It says, all can find some way to support this process, even if one chooses to engage in personal teaching by any method over collective teaching campaigns. The issue at times is a sense of inadequacy and a feeling of inferiority hampering individual initiative. A letter on behalf of the Guardian says this: "It is precisely these weaknesses that he wishes the Friends to overcome, for these do not only paralyze their efforts, but actually serve to quench the flame of faith in their hearts. Not until all the Friends come to realize that every one of them is able in his own measure to deliver the message can they ever hope to reach the goal that has been set before them by a loving and wise master. Everyone is a potential teacher. He has only to use what God has given him and thus prove that he is faithful to his trust." I will end with another reminder of the services of the Friends during the 10-year crusade. As I mentioned before, today we would do well to recall the heroic actions of those who arose to serve the needs of the 10-year crusade and the sacrifices they made to change their way of life in order to be able to serve the plan. May we also be inspired to make changes in our lives when and if necessary to be able to serve the needs of the current 9-year plan the way we want to and the way the plan deserves to be served. Here is the promise of the Universal House of Justice. If by the grace of Almighty God, the Friends should succeed in reaching the heights of heroism to which they are now summoned, history will assuredly pay tribute to their actions in terms no less glowing than those with which it honors the glorious deeds that decorate the annals of the first century of the formative age. Friends, I hope that this 1 hour reflecting on the 9-year plan has been useful and it will be an inspiration for your own further reflections. Thank you for your attention.